Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Ari, and today we're going to have some more stories about our toxic life. But before we start, it would be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to my channel, like the video, if you enjoy it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now without further ado, let's go. Today's first story. In this story, Opie discovers his wife's affair with a cabin owner during a weekend getaway meant to rekindle their romance. Feeling betrayed, he confronts her, leading to their separation. As he focuses on raising their son, he grapples with the pain of lost love and the reality of his wife's cheating. Now let's get into the story. I, 30 male, and my wife, 31 female, have been together for over 12 years. We met when we were young and hit it off almost immediately. We were at a Halloween party, dressed in matching costumes without either of them planning it. I courted her, and within those 6 months we started dating went steady, and then 2 years later I asked her to marry me. I was 20 and she was 21. We got married 5 years later. Yes, it took a while, but between her getting pregnant and me trying to get my degree, things got crazy. School ate up so much of my time. She also went to hairdressing school and worked on the side as a beautician while raising our son. Time passed, and when it was time, we had a wedding. It was perfect. Flowers, extravagance, you name it, we had it. It was the best day of my life. When I think about her eyes as she said I do, it brings joy to me. Now though, it brings only heartache of what's been lost. After we got married, we moved into a nicer house. Work was tedious, and for both of us, it was hard to get time for each other. Tommy, my son, grew up, and soon he needed us less. My wife and I started to have more free time. We took advantage of that and encouraged intimacy. However, something seemed wrong. I couldn't shake it, but I had a bad feeling about it. She accused me of paranoia plenty of times, but this time it felt like there was an exterior force working, driving me crazy. It was a month from our 5-year anniversary. I wanted to do something special. I asked her where she wanted to go. She told me a cabin in the woods would be good. It sounded perfect, a chance for us to have some alone time and rekindle our relationship. At least that's what I told myself. I thought it was just a lull in our relationship, but it became something more. We packed our stuff and Tommy got pizza money. He was 9 and I had a family member check on him. But he's the type of kid that's good with Fortnite and TikTok in front of him, even though I limit that when I'm at home. We drove out to the Smokies and over to our cabin. When we arrived, a man with large muscles and a trimmed beard greeted us. He's the owner of these cabins. When we got in there, I looked over at my wife. She did a full 180 from the woman I'd been with for the last decade. She was smiling, a little flirty, and kept asking for the guy's name. He just said it was Joe and nothing more. After we checked in, I asked her what that was about. She just said he was a nice guy. However, I didn't buy it. We had the entire weekend together. I thought maybe she would get out of it. Before we got to the car, she told me she left something inside. I sighed and told her to go get it. She took a little longer than I expected, but I thought maybe she dropped it. When we got to the cabin, we unpacked. My wife seemed strained. I asked her if there was anything wrong. She said no, but she was feeling a bit sick. I told her going on a hike might help, but she said she wasn't feeling super great. Naturally, I wanted to stay behind. Told me I didn't have to, that she would be fine, and that she didn't want me to miss the sunset. I said fine, and I went up alone. I saw the sunset, but I missed my wife. When I got back, I saw a light turn off in one of the back rooms. It was strange, but I dismissed it. I came in, and my wife seemed happier. We cuddled around the fire and told stories. I thought things were great. The next day, we went hiking and saw more views, but my wife seemed a little distant. She kept checking her phone, even though we weren't in an area with service. I asked her what the problem was. She told me she was worried about Tommy. Yeah, she was worried about something. All right, just not him. That evening, my wife said she wanted to go out to the thermal baths they had. I offered to join her, but she said it was fine. We got into an argument and finally, I asked her what was going on. She insisted nothing was, and that she just wanted to soak her aching muscles. She did have some physical problems, but I didn't think that she would soak for well over an hour. When she came back, I tried to have intimate with her, but she was acting weird. Sure, it was alright, but she wasn't into it per se. Now she always seemed to enjoy it until, of course, tonight. Okay, something was very wrong. I tried to ask her again, but she shut me out. The next day, she was sick. I wasn't in the mood to argue, but I wanted to hike. She told me to take pictures and see it without me. I told her that I wanted to go with her. We got into a heated argument to the point that I needed some space. I left the cabin. That was where I made my first mistake. I spent the rest of the day outside, but when I tried talking to my wife, telling her that I was sorry, I couldn't get a hold of her. This bothered me. Even when we had our worst arguments, she would always come back to me. I had a bad feeling in the pit of my gut about this. I got back early, not even bothering to let her know that I was coming back. When I got closer, I noticed the backlight was dimmed and there were sounds. At first, I assumed it was a wild animal, but it wasn't. I opened the door very quietly and peered inside. What I saw was like a gut punch to the heart. There was my wife, riding Joe. She looked happy, more than she ever did with me. I dropped my backpack and stared in shock. When she finally realized I was there, she crawled off him. She told me that she was sorry and she couldn't get enough of him. She told him that he seduced her. I looked at Joe, asking him if it was true. Joe said no, that she was the one who made all the advances, and he even said that he didn't want to do this, but she forced herself on him. I was crushed. My wife, my love for over a decade, pushed me away for a random stranger. She begged me to take her back, but I told her no. She did this on our anniversary. What was she thinking? Doing this? This sort of thing. I told her that we were over, took off the ring, and said that if she wanted out, she should have said something. That's when she spilled that everything in the relationship was my fault, gaslighting me into making it seem I was to blame for everything. Sure enough, most of the problems were caused by her. In a fury, I drove back, leaving her stranded with Joe at the cabin. If she wanted him so badly, then she could have him. Tommy was a little annoyed that I got back early since he couldn't play Fortnite all the time. In anger, I told him that Mom and Dad weren't together anymore. He asked what happened, and I told him he'd know when he was older. My lawyer helped, and I got the house, the cars, everything. Me and my wife share custody with our son. I don't know if Joe ended up marrying my wife, or if he was but another flame. I didn't care. Since then, I've been focusing on my job, raising Tommy and preventing those same mistakes. I thought I married my one true love, but it turns out she was a monster in disguise. Today's second story. In this story, after a grueling night shift, Opie returns home to find signs of cheating from his girlfriend. Disturbed by a pair of unfamiliar boxers and the scent of his coworker, he grows suspicious. Later, he discovers them together in the basement. Instead of confronting them directly, he locks them in, allowing her brother to discover the scene. The fallout leads to AP's arrest and her public shame, ultimately freeing him to move on from the betrayal. Now let's get into the story. I had just returned home from one of my night 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. shifts at the hospital, and my head ached slightly due to the long, sleepless night I had. I had worked more because a coworker had called in just in the nick of time to report his unavailability for the night shift, and that left us short a pair of hands. I had just one thing on my mind that day, and that was to sleep all day. The only problem with that plan was that I had promised to go with Nora, my girlfriend, to see how her aunt was doing. Her aunt had been diagnosed with cancer and was receiving treatment at home. Nora went to see her most of the time, and when necessary, they came to the hospital where I worked. I felt it affected Nora's mental health since that was her favorite aunt, and she was the closest to her aside from her aunt's visiting mate. So whenever she requested, I let her have some space. She'd tell me she wanted some nights to herself to clear her head, and I would willingly oblige. Sometimes 4 nights a week. During those moments, we wouldn't call each other's line because what's the point of staying away from each other? Only to spend time on the phone? Although it really wasn't helping our relationship by shutting down communications, I had no other option. Since Nora's sleep always seemed disturbed by my arrival at a few minutes past 6 in the morning, I had taken one of the keys to the back door from its bunch, which lay on the kitchen counter. This was to let me slip into the house and not disturb her sleep. For the record, I live in a housing estate with no fence and all that. Just the lawns around the building and the asphalt roads separate one building from another on all 4 sides. I parked in the front driveway since my garage and basement were about to undergo construction. As I walked to the back of the building, I was urged to notice that a car had driven right into the lawn behind the house. I wondered how anyone on earth could be so insensitive to veer off the tar driveway, right into the grass, and even up close to the building. First, I inserted the key into the lock and turned, but it wouldn't budge. This only indicated that there was another key in the keyhole on the other side. It was strange. We hardly ever use the back door. If there's a key on the other side, it's possible the door is open, I said to myself. To my surprise, as I pulled the handle, the door went wide open. Why would Nora want to take the back door for any reason? I heard myself asking, could there have been a visitor? The only person I knew who might stop by was her brother Drake. He worked with the civil construction firm, and he was the one who I contracted to fix my basement. But Drake wouldn't drive up my backyard, let alone get into my house through the back door. I shook it off my mind and silently closed the door so as not to awaken Nora, who definitely would be sleeping by that time. But I was in for another surprise. By muscle memory, I picked a strong familiar scent in the kitchen. It was the cologne of someone I knew, Frank, my coworker who had been absent. The scents got stronger as I made my way through to the staircase and eventually upstairs. But it had to be my mind playing a trick on me. It was practically impossible for Frank to be at my house while we were supposed to be at work together. It was impossible. He was a good guy and I knew his girlfriend. In fact, he had only been to my house once before, and that was over a year ago. I also was not sure if he was really close enough to Nora to want to stop by my house. And if there was an emergency, I knew who Nora would call. Yes, they had met a few times when Nora brought her aunt to the hospital, but that was normal. I imagined for the first time in my life that Nora could be cheating on me, but I quickly shook off the thoughts. As I made my way to the bedroom door, all I wanted to do was sneak into bed and have a full day off. But as I got closer, I could hear the water running in the bathroom. Nora was bathing. Nothing too strange, but wasn't it too early for that? At least for Nora, I knew. I knew she'd be surprised to see me in the bedroom because I had a tradition of buzzing the front doorbell while she scrunched her way downstairs, heavy with sleep, to get the door. While a part of me wanted to sink into bed and knock it off, I knew I had to first get my scrubbing clothes into the washing machine. I grabbed an extra towel and made for the guest bathroom at the other end of the corridor since the washing machine was there too. But something besides the washing machine got my attention. It was a pair of boxers which weren't mine. For a moment, I freaked out. I never wore that pair of boxers, never. I tried to calm my head and ignore the glaring facts that were staring at me in the face. Nora had finished in the bathroom and made it. Must have heard my footsteps, walking across the corridor, because soon the bedroom door flew open and she stood with her towel wrapped around her body. "Sebastian," she cried, "how and when did you come home?" "Through the chimney," I said, faking a smile but burning with a billion questions inside. Questions that needed immediate answers. Questions that would save or destroy our relationship. "Wait a second, honey, who owns this?" I asked casually, raising the boxers for her to see. I noticed her gasp in shock as she struggled to put her thoughts together. This was when I knew I had lost the relationship. I'd never felt the kind of heartbreak I felt in that minute since my life began. "Oh, those," she said, I guess they belong to Drake." "Drake?" "Yeah, he was here last night to check out the basement and all that, and I think he must have forgotten it after he had a shower." "Oh, that's fine," I said, trying to make the moment easier for her. I quickly turned and got into the bathroom and turned on the shower even before I took off my clothes. Everything was wrong with the answer she had given everything. For Drake was much bigger than the slim pair of boxers I held. He also couldn't have come back to inspect the basement because he did that while I was at home during the day yesterday, and I personally dropped him off before going to work. And finally, The scent of the cologne on that pair of boxers was strong and unmistakable. Somehow in the midst of it all, I chuckled. Could this have been the reason why he called in absent? Could this have been why Nora was always taking some days and nights off for her alone time? For how long had I been played on? By that time I was done. I decided I was going to walk away from her, but not without letting her have her teachable moments. That moment thankfully came within the week. A few days later, I woke up at night with a horrible feeling. My instincts might not always be right, but that night I knew beyond all doubt that something was wrong. I couldn't tell what it was. I checked the time, and it was 4 a.m. I just had this horrible feeling of everything not being all right. Nora was not on the bed, and she wasn't in the bathroom either. But her phone was on the pillow. She never went anywhere without it. So why now? I picked up her phone, but it was locked. After serious brainstorming, I figured out the passcode. To say the least, I was baffled by the chat which was left on the screen. It was with the contact saved as Mom. I decided to follow through. My heart raced as I saw firsthand the depth of foolery I was in. I typed out the contact on my phone, and before I could complete it, Frank's name came up. I checked again, and it matched. I got to the bottom of the conversation, but could not believe what I saw. I quietly walked downstairs and went towards the basement. Sure enough, as I approached, I could hear coming from the basement quiet moans of Nora and a masculine voice, as well as the accompanying sounds which proved what they were doing. I burned with such anger I never felt before. Standing in the shadows of the entrance door, I watched in pain as I was betrayed by the closest people in my life. They were too busy to see me, but their clothes were out the door. Then a thought occurred to me. I quietly shut the door, which happened to be the only entrance from inside, and locked it. Picking up their clothes, I headed into my room, took a brief shower, and left for work earlier than normal. I also found Frank's phone in his pants pocket and took it with me to work. Then I called Drake, Nora's brother. "Hey Drake," I said, "do you think you and your team could start the job in the basement this morning?" "Yeah, sure," he said. I was feeling super restless, and sure enough, Frank did not report for duty. How could he? He was stuck in my basement. 2 hours later, I got the call I was anticipating. Nora's brother called me and sounded like he was hyperventilating. He and his team had found stark naked Nora and Frank in the basement, trying to take cover from him and the team behind a beam. I listened silently as he kept going on about who his sister was and how embarrassed he was made out to be in front of his team, who were all local men who knew him and his family dearly. I could hear Nora frantically crying out about something in the background. He started apologizing profusely to me and said that he and his guys kicked but naked Frank out into the street. The aftermath was spectacular, but naked Frank was arrested for public flashing, as one of my neighbors reported him. He also made it to the local news. My coworkers and I watched him and his naked arse get arrested on breaking news on our lounge TV. Needless to say, he was indefinitely suspended from work. As for Nora, well, my BL's good team made sure the word spread around the town like wildfire. The scrutiny was so much. I heard she quit her job and became a shut-in at her parents' place for months to follow. What happened afterward? I have no idea. Maybe she's still living in her parents' basement and screwing dudes secretly. Somehow my coworkers were able to put 2 and 2 together and were extremely sympathetic to me, which felt nice. I took a few days off, packed all of Nora's stuff, and called my brother-in-law to ask her to pick them up. One day when I returned home, her stuff was gone. She never attempted to contact me ever again, and like that, she was gone from my life. And I wish I could say I cared, but I didn't. There was just so much more to look forward to in life.